To this day, it is known as a forgotten war, but for many Korean War veterans, the notion of forgetting is inconceivable. For the past 62 years, a small group of surviving members have carried memories of horror and heroism from one of the war's most brutal conflicts that is simply known as the Battle of Chosin Reservoir.
Well, the conditions over there involved an enemy who vastly outnumbered us.
They killed 3,000 of us up there, and they wounded over 6,600. But that includes the Army's Regimental Combat Team and the British Royal Marines.
Trapped by an encirclement of 120,000 soldiers from a relentless and unforgiving Chinese army, the 15,000 Allied ground forces known as the Chosin Few, comprised of U.S. soldiers, sailors, and Marines, along with their British counterparts, fought their way through 78 miles of roadblock after roadblock on mountainous terrain and minus 30-degree weather before finally making it to their extraction point in the port city of Hungnam, North Korea.
The Chinese came back in, were replacing the roadblocks, holding the convoy up, and the lorries at different intervals were getting shot up, having to be pushed off the road, set on fire and so forth.
A total of 17 Medals of Honor, 70 Navy Crosses, plus many Distinguished Service Crosses were awarded for the campaign, the most for a single battle in U.S. military history. Reporting for Army South, Sergeant Robert Quintero.
My name is Nancy Ferris. I'm the director for Three Valley Museum. I'm here today with videographer Cameron Wakefield and our new best friend, Mr. Jim Haun. Jim is a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, having served in World War II, the Korean War, and also in Vietnam. So he's agreed to visit with us today and tell us some of his stories, and we're just so delighted to have this opportunity to talk to you, because I can tell in just our short time together that you have a lot of things to tell.
It'll take me several days to tell all.
Yes, I'm sure that's true. So you want to start with how you got into the Marine Corps?
Well, I was in the National Guard to start with.
Okay.
And I seen a Marine walking down the street in Denison one day with a girlfriend, and there's 4 Army guys walking along behind him, teasing him and everything. He told them leave them alone. They wouldn't do it. So he told the girl, go ahead and on down the line, and he stayed there and he wiped all 4 of them out.
So they were pretty tough.
That made me decide I want to be a Marine then.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a good reason. If you're going to be in it, you need to be the best, don't you? You need to be the toughest. So where were you first stationed when you went into the Marines?
Well, when I went, of course, I went in San Diego to boot camp and then Camp Pendleton combat training. And then they sent me right straight over. The war was actually over then, the fighting part. They sent me into Japan on occupation duty.
And what was the date of that?
And you got me.
Do you remember the year?
It was 45.
It was in 45.
I remember the year, but the month I don't know.
Yeah. So they sent you straight
over to Japan. I landed at Sasebo and went inland on the Kyushu Island over onto the East Coast. The name of the town was Nobioka. There was 2 towns like Sherman and Denison, only it was Nobioka and Mini Nobioka. And it was there for I don't know how long. Then they sent me to China from there.
Mm-hmm. And what was your duty in China?
I was guard.
Okay.
We guarded. Well, we had a big ammo dump where we. It's actually fuel dump is actually what it was. We had to guard that to be sure that nobody blew it up or anything like that. And we had a bunch of warehouses that had supplies in it for us and so forth. We had to guard all of that. And so I stood guard there. It got pretty hot in the summertime there.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
How many were there from your How many Marines were based there?
I have no idea. I can tell you there's stationed all over China, though. And we had, I'll say, a regiment where I was at. I'm not sure how many the regiment is, but it's a pretty good sized place, though. And we had guarded the place where we were at, and we had a couple of walking posts downtown. Just sort of like an MP would be.
Oh, okay. What was your rank at that time?
I was a PFC.
Okay.
But as it turned out, that was part of the time that I was holding down a platoon leader's job, which is a lieutenant's job, as a PFC. I was senior man in my platoon, and so I was in charge of it. But it was that way for a long time. And then I finally came back to the States from there.
You came from China back to the United States?
Yes.
And where were you stationed then?
Well, I was stationed in Camp Pendleton, and I was in MP company there. And when the Korean War broke out in June of 1950 there, they started transferring all of us out. I stayed there, though. And everybody else, all the old guys, was transferred out. Me being senior PFC and so forth, I got to train the reserves that came in to take her place.
I see.
And I just barely did get them to train when I was transferred out to Korea.
Well, let's go back just a little bit to the bombing of Japan. You were talking about that a little bit.
Oh, yes. Well, Nagasaki and Hiroshima is the two towns that got the atomic bomb dropped. And Jimmy Doolittle was the one that did it. And the towns, both of them, was nothing standing completely. This little remnants standing, little mounds of stuff. And the iron was on anything that was had iron in it was melted, rolled up into little balls and stuff. I felt so sorry for those people. But I was glad that we did drop the A-bomb, because if we hadn't, we might still be fighting the Japanese.
Mm-hmm. You said they were very well equipped.
Yes. The mountains, I went into one of the mountains there, and I'm assuming that it's all the same way. When I went to China, the Japanese had already started doing the mountains in China that way. I've seen one in China also. But the one in Japan there, it was in such a way that each pillbox in the mountain all the way up to the top was covering one another, either this way or that way. Nobody could get up or down on it. And up to the top had a coastal gun underground. If they got the word that there's a ship coming in out there, then they would, this gun would come up out of the ground and shoot. And they could shoot, and if they started getting bombs or anything like that on them, they'd go back underground. And there was a good 5 or 6 foot of concrete and iron and dirt over the top of those guns. So they'd had to have been a completely direct hit to have done any damage, and I'm not sure it would have then.
And how far could they shoot?
Out into the ocean. That gun up on top, if they got the word that there was ships coming in out there, they'd come up and shoot out there. Of course, we never did have to do all of that.
Right.
But they could have got the ships out there before we even got into the shore.
And that's the Japanese that would be shooting at you, so
Right.
more than a mile? The range was more than a mile?
It was more like 10 or 15 miles.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now the pillboxes where I was at just had rifles, which would be 1,000 feet or something like that is all they'd be good for. But the gun up on top, though, it would shoot 10, 15 miles.
So define a pillbox for those of us who wouldn't know.
Well, pillbox are made in several different directions. You can dig them in the ground and build up the deal up over the top and have little peepholes out of them for in combat, something like that. Or shelters. If you was protecting something, you'd have deep foxholes and a lot of concrete or dirt over the top and little peepholes there that you could shoot out of. and one escape route or something that way, you know.
Kind of like a honeycomb.
Yeah. Wasn't as sweet as honeycomb.
No. Did you go back to Japan after the bombing? Did you see?
Of course, I wasn't there during the bombing. It was the war was over with when I went in there, and I seen all of this after the fact. And if we'd had to take it, it would have been so hard to do. But I went from Japan to China, and there's a mountain out back of the place where our camp was. We took over what we call a Japanese compound. Originally it was a Chinese college campus, and they had tunnels, like from the barracks where I was at. We could go down into the basement, go into the tunnel, and go underneath all these buildings over there, and up into the mountain out there that had the pillboxes and so forth. And the gun up, they had a gun up on top of it too, but we'd already destroyed it.
So you came back to the States and started preparing to go to Korea. What actually started the Korean War?
Well, North Korea invaded South Korea. Now, other for them wanting to take over the property there, that's the only reason I could say that they did it. But, and I was at Camp Pendleton in the MP company at the time, and all the people there, the older people like myself, ones who'd been there for a while, the experienced people, they were shipping them out to what we call Tent Camp 2 in Camp Pendleton. And there they'd join a company, you know, they'd make up a company, and they'd go out and do a little training, and then they'd go overseas to Korea. Well, nobody went to Korea until I got there, but after I got a bunch of reserves and got them trained, a lot got transferred out to Camp 2. The CO called me in there one day and said, I want you to take these 7 men, go aboard this ship out here, report to the sergeant major. And I got the 7 men. There was one of them that was a reserve. The others was World War II veterans. So we got on board the ship. I reported to the sergeant major there. And he told me, why are you here? I said, I didn't need you. And he said, but you report to me twice a day. I had to report to him in the morning and the evening. Let him know that those 4 men that I had were still on board ship. They hadn't jumped overboard or anything like that. And so since I knew that those 3 men was World War II veterans, they knew as much or more about it than I did. So I took the reserve and I started training him. And he was with me then until we went up to North Korea. We made an Incheon-Seoul landing and made our way up in North Korea, and we got trapped up there somewhere or another up there. He was still in the company I was, but we were 75 recoilless and anti-tank company is what it was. And if the battalion needed 75s out there to protect them from tanks and things like that, we'd send a company or a platoon out with them. And also, if there's a pillbox they couldn't get, we'd use that to shoot it out the pillbox. But somewhere along the line, then we got separated. Well, he had to go out, and I stayed with the headquarters company there. And I was there until we fought our way back out. I was sitting at the foot of East Hill. If you ever hear of East Hill, that was the main hill there. The Chinese tried to come over where we was at, and we had to retake that hill a couple of times. And by the way, if I start crying, don't worry about it.
Well, I'll be crying with you. We may all be crying.
Yeah, a while ago, there was a little bit that I almost choked up over.
Yeah.
But like the Korean, or the Hiroshima and Nagasaki thing, when I was feeling sorry for them, because those people, they had no idea what was going on or anything like that. They knew that they was fighting everybody else there, but those civilians, they didn't know any more about it than we did, probably. But anyway, we went in, 7th Marines was in reserve when we made the Incheon-Seoul landing. But,
and how did you land?
I landed by the landing craft, went off the ship down the rope ladder, you know. And of course, I had the reserve with me, and the others too. But they knew how to go down the ladders. But he had never done it before, so I had to instruct him on how to go down. When we got down there and landed, we had to go in. Now, you had to be in there a certain time. The tide would go out so fast and everything that if there's any boats in there, they couldn't get out. In fact, the mud was so deep that you couldn't even walk through it there. So it was not accessible when the tide was out. But then whenever it was in, we'd send people in and go out. Then there's a little causeway that went into Incheon. And then we fought our way from Incheon over to Korea, over to Seoul. Yeah, Seoul.
And how many were making that landing at the time? Do you remember?
Well, I know the 1st Marine Division was, and there's some Army, I don't know if it was a whole Army regiment or not, but there was a bunch of them too. When we went in, Army came in, we went north and they went south. They opened it up back down south where all the enemy were. We cut off the supply route to them, so they didn't have much choice except to give up.
Yeah. What time of year was that? What was the weather like then?
Well, it's hard to say. It was in September when I made the landing there.
Okay.
My birthday was the 29th of September. And
Was that your birthday present?
That was my birthday present going into North Korea.
Oh, wow.
I was at the 30th parallel on my birthday.
Oh, my goodness.
And then we went on up. Well, we didn't go far after that. They took the 1st Marine Division out. We had to go back aboard ship and circle around and make a land at Incheon. But they got up there, and the harbor, well, not Incheon, Wonsan Hamhung and stuff. The harbor was so full of mines that we couldn't land. We sat out there and sailed back and forth for 2 weeks while they cleared the mines out of the harbor, and then we landed. When we landed, we hit the beach there, and we got out there. We heard a lot of singing, clapping hands, and everything else. We went around the corner, and here's Bob Hope. And the girl that was with him, he was entertaining some soldiers out that had fought their way up, and they was out there all over.
Who were the girls?
I want to say Marilyn Monroe, but as the woman that Bob Hope was almost always had with him, I don't recall whether it was Marilyn or not, but she was a nice-looking girl.
You were glad to see her, I bet.
But we didn't get to see her for just a second because they made us move on out. We after we got in, so forth, we got on trucks and we headed up north, went up to the pass up into North Korea, up to Kotari and Haeguri. And that's as far north as I got. We left a regiment at Kotari, which is 11 miles south of us. And the 5th and 7th regiments went up to Udamni, which was sort of west of us, on the west side of Chosin Reservoir. We were set up sort of on the southern tip of the reservoir there. Then the Army had 2 armored regiments came up there Thanksgiving Day. Thanksgiving Day, we had our last hot meal. We never had any more hot meals until we got back down south and close to Christmas time.
Is that right? From Thanksgiving to Christmas,
Right.
it was all...
It was 60 below zero. And that's something when I was there waiting for everybody to get into us, they had this guy out there, the meteorologist. I asked him what he's doing. He said, I'm getting temperature. I said, what is it? He said, 60 below. And I wouldn't have believed it if he hadn't been. I knew that it was cold and all that stuff, but our water was frozen. We was having to get snow off the ground for water. Our food was frozen. And but anyway, I've told people before about the temperature there, and some of them look at me like, you're lying to me. But I didn't have, I didn't bring that. I was going to bring that book down too. It's a red book, and it has in it, the meteorologist evidently the one that talked to me, talked to them, because they got it wrote in the book there. Temperature 60 below plus. This is something I didn't know. Wind chills 125. And now, here's when I say I, this is the way all of us, if I say I eat Tootsie Rolls, all of us did. But that's another little thing there. But I was dressed flannel long johns, Marine Corps wool greens, Marine Corps utilities, a field jacket which was windproof and waterproof, and it had a fur liner in it, and it had a hood on it, of course. And we had gloves, by the way. We had these, and then we had gloves that fit over these.
Okay.
They were sort of like the glove, or like our field jacket, sort of windproof and waterproof and stuff like that. But anyway, well, might as well get on to how we got the Tootsie Rolls.
Oh, okay. There was nothing to eat but Tootsie Rolls.
Right, and we didn't. If we wouldn't have had that, well, I blame 3 reasons why I'm here today. Number 1 is God, the commanding general, and the Tootsie Rolls. The Tootsie Rolls kept me alive, and when I say me, I'm talking about all of us. Of course, we had guys over the clothes I told you I had. There's a lot of guys inside sleeping bag, which had a flannel and cotton and all that stuff in there, also in a windproof bag. We had people froze to death in those things, like that. They go in there and go to sleep and freeze to death. So, 60 below is pretty cold. But anyway, our artillery had a code word. If they started getting low in ammunition, they didn't want to call back and say, we're getting low, send us some ammunition. Because if the enemy heard it, they'd say, now's the time to hit. So the code word was Tootsie Rolls. And artillery, by the way, was set up right behind me. And I got to talk to the artillery people. I knew all of this before it happened even. But they called back and said, send us a load of Tootsie Rolls. And they did. A whole C-130 full of Tootsie Rolls dropped out there. Big cases. I got, well, where we was at, we got 3 or 4 big cases of Tootsie Rolls there. And I was going to bring one of the long Tootsie Rolls. I still got one of them. And show you and so forth. I didn't do it. But anyway, they passed the Tootsie Rolls out. But it's so cold, even I put my Tootsie Rolls in next to my long johns, not next to my skin. I'm glad I didn't, because it probably froze the skin and it pulled the skin off. Because they were still frozen solid. The only way the Tootsie Rolls, those long ones, they was in sort of bite size, but they're still together. And normally you'd just bite them in two and eat. But this is frozen so hard, we had to put them down on something and take something and hit them and break them loose. Then put them in our mouth and let them thaw before we could eat. And I brought it shows a few digests there, that thing there that this a guy, we were supposed to write stories about our Tootsie Roll experiences, well, just combat experiences, not Tootsie Rolls, but there's one guy in there said he'd done that and said he got to wondering how long it took for it to thaw out after he got it in his mouth. And he timed it. After he broke it off and got it in his mouth, he said it took 2 hours before it thawed out enough that he could chew it.
Oh, word.
Well, I don't think I'm not sure that I ever done that. What I remember doing is breaking it off, putting it in my mouth, and leaving it there until it dissolved. And then I'd eat it, and then I'd break another one and put it in my mouth. I think I kept one in my mouth just about all the time. Whenever I'd finish eating one, well, I'd put another one in. And
why Tootsie Rolls? Do you know? Is that a new candy
well,
back in the States?
I'd never heard about it or anything until then. But, of course, the Tootsie Rolls, there's another little deal there. That's a candy, and it's good. I still eat them. I got Tootsie Rolls there, and I unroll them, still put them in my mouth, but they're already bite size. But
probably had a long shelf life.
But you know,
especially frozen.
well, the Tootsie Roll people heard about this. The CEO and his wife, they called our office, and, the main office where the Tootsie Roll, or where the Chosin Fuse made it. and they wanted to join a fraternity, and so we got them to join it. Well, he died about 4 or 5 years ago, but his wife is still attending some of our reunions. I think this last one, I think that she had to go and stay just for a few hours and then come back, but she went to the one. I didn't go because my wife being bedbound and stuff like that. I'm still taking care of her. But anyway, when I went to San Diego about 4 years ago, somebody here paid my way, mine, my wife, and my caretaker, out to San Diego, paid for everything, car rental, a motel out there, train fare out there, and everything.
So that you could meet your other members that were in your platoon?
Well, I tell you what, I don't think there's one guy, that reserve I told you about. Mm-hmm. I got to wondering about him after I retired and so forth, and I think I wrote through the chosen few there. Yeah, I did. And there's another. His last name is Snotty, and I asked if there's a Snotty in there, and there was, but it was a cousin of his that, and he wrote and told me about it, and he got this Snotty to write me, and so we got in contact, and he died a few years ago too, but after a while, though, I was talking to him like that, and we got in contact. I went out there, one of our reunions out close to him, and I met him again out there. But,
so tell me, when you were in Korea, and you've already said where you all were stationed, where you were telling us that you were surrounded. So you want to explain that landscape for us again?
Well, the Chosin Reservoir was a big reservoir there, but it was frozen over so thick that we had 6 guys that drove out on it, and they drove out on it. These 2 Army regiments I was telling you about, they got run over, and just very few of them got out. But some of them got out on the ice out there, and we rescued. We had a helicopter sent up that told them to get out on the ice, and we would pick them up. And so we had that. Now, I had a friend, he's dead now also, but he was one of the ones, and he used to introduce me to people who was saving his life. Personally, I didn't, but we got him on a truck and brought him back to where, in my area there, and of course his life was saved because of that. But I had a deal I was wanting to bring it down, show it to you. Seemed like whenever I want to find something, I have the hardest time finding it.
I understand. I do.
This right here is some stuff that I had stacked up that I was going to bring down for something else there, and so I already had it going. But that red book, I looked for that, and I looked for the letter of this guy, this soldier that got trapped up there. He became a good friend of mine. I kept on putting things in the paper about the chosen few and so forth, and anybody that was there around this area, I asked them to get in contact with me, and I'd put them in contact with the company where they could join it if they wanted to. And a friend of his seen it in the paper and gave it to him, and he said he folded it up, put it in the Bible, and didn't even read it. He said about 2 or 3 years later, he opened it up and read it, and he called me. And it so happened, it was in August. I never will forget it because I don't know what year it was. But it was in August. Cecil Carpenter used to go out on the lake. He lived out Paradise Cove, and he'd go out on the lake every year fishing. He had his own boat, and he'd fish. He'd catch a fish, and clean them and dress them and put them in the freezer. And every August, we'd have a fish fry out at his place. And it was August, just a matter of about a week or so until it was going to have one. I invited him out. He came out there and he liked it, so he joined it. from then on, see, we had a lot of reunions down in Dallas and Fort Worth because just a few people in our chapter around here. And Cecil was one of them, and I think there's might have been one or two others. But anyway, Cecil, I haven't got to talk to him for a long time. I hear that he's still active, but I don't know how well. Last time I seen him, he was in a wheelchair. But
So I know that the group that you're referring to, the name of the group is called the Chosin Few.
yes,
And that refers basically to your group that was pinned down in Korea.
we were the few that was chosen to get out.
Yes, you were yeah. So how many were there of you that actually got to get out?
I'm not sure. I could probably find it in that book because they do tell about it in there. But there's a couple of, well, probably about 10 or 12,000 of us,
Okay.
mostly. I mean, that's including everybody. And I'm not sure that that's correct. I'm just guessing at that.
But out of your group, did you say 28?
The 28 on Fox Company alone, and my company, I don't know how many because we were spread. We was, like I said, 75 was a anti-tank company, and we had 75 recoilless. They would send out with battalions or regiments to back them up. You know, if there's tanks coming, we'd go and shoot them or open up pillboxes for them, things like that.
So these were the Chinese that you were actually up against there in Korea,
Well, yes.
that you were actually fighting.
The Chinese slipped over across the border. I don't know how our intelligence failed to see any of it, but they crossed over at night. They'd hide in the mountains in the daytime, things like that. But they was told to wipe us out to the man. Don't take any prisoners. Kill everybody. Said if they do that, if they wipe the 1st Marine Division out, the American people would be so discouraged that they would not want to get back in the fight. But we fooled them. Like I said, there's 3 reasons. One of them was God. Our commanding general, they told him to tell us to get out any way we could. In other words, we was outnumbered 50 to 1. And can you imagine one person trying to fight their way through 50 people?
Right.
And not only that, but it's 150 miles back to the front lines. In that kind of weather, we probably, if we didn't get killed through the enemy, we would starve to death or froze to death. But our commanding general says, no, said we're coming out as a unit or we're not coming out. He kept us together. We fought our way out. We made it out.
Great. Do you remember his name?
Yes, I sure do. He is a Texan, by the way.
Very good.
General O.P. Smith. We call him Howlin' Mad Smith because even though he was a general, if he didn't think it was right, he'd let them know it. And in fact, whenever he was going up north, they told him to take the men that we've got, just keep going on up to the 30th parallel. And he said, no, we're going to stop right here until we get supplies. We get supplies up here, then we'll go further. When we get up there, supplies catch up. We're not going to go without supplies. And that's the reason that we made it out, because we stayed there with supplies. Now, if we went on up, we wouldn't have had any supplies, and probably every one of us had got wiped out.
So basically you all were down in a hole in the reservoir area, and the enemy was in the mountains all
around us,
shooting down on you.
Not just shooting, but they had mortars and things like that too that they dropped in on us, and some artillery, I'm sure. But
60 degrees below zero.
yes,
125 mile wind chill
yeah.
factor. The odds were all against you.
Yes.
And so how did the name, the Chosin Few, come about? Did the general name you that?
No. There was a couple of our men in San Diego. They knew one another or something like that when they went back as civilians were retiring and stuff. And they got together and was talking about it, and they started wondering about other friends, and so they would call them, and first thing you know, they had a group there, and then they started to think, well, bit of a branch out. They organized it in San Diego, and I think that's where they started calling it the Chosen Few. And one of the men's wives designed this for us.
Okay.
And the Chosen Few, of course, consists of anybody and everybody that was up there at the Chosin Reservoir. It can be Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, civilian, anybody that was there, corpsman that was there. There's so many things about corpsmen, too. They didn't get the recognition that they needed because they gave their lives.
So Chosin was the name of the reservoir.
Yes, and that's, well, Chengjian was really the name of it.
Let's see.
But the Japanese, that was the Korean name for it, Chengjian.
Okay.
The Japanese, they came in, they started calling it Chosin. On their maps, they had Chosin Road on it, and that's the way we come by that. We just used their name for it.
That was easier for us to say.
Yeah.
We understood that.
We could remember Chosin a lot easier than we could Chengjian.
Yes. So tell me about the day when you all made it out.
Well, it was about 2 weeks or so leading up to that. Well, of course, we had to fight our way out. And I joined Fox Company, and we spearheaded it out from Hagaru to Coterie. And when we got to Coterie...
Was this ground fire? Was this...
we was on the ground,
yeah.
taking it hill at a time, tree at a time, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to Coterie. We would start out 4 o'clock one morning, and it was 6 o'clock the next morning before we got to 11 miles. It took that long to go the 11 miles. The CO, the lieutenant was in charge of the platoon there, he said, okay, find a tent and get you a little rest. We hadn't had anything to eat, by the way, except Tootsie Rolls. But anyway, I started looking at through the tents there. Every tent would open up, and there'd be guys sitting there back against the wall, at the tent wall, and they'd be sitting like this on the ground, and there'd be somebody sitting here with their backs this way, and this guy would be around that way, and shoulder to shoulder though. And the fire, there's a kerosene fire stove there in the middle of it, and it's all around. Every one of them, the tent was packed full like it. Every one of them I went into like it. Finally, I opened up one. They said, "Come on in, we'll make room," and they did. They moved around until I got in there, and just about the time I was getting good and comfortable and about ready to go to sleep, Fox Company back out on the road, and we had to go out. The Chinese had broke the line between Coterie and Hagaru. We had to go back and open it up. We stayed there all day then, keeping it open for everybody to go through. Then when we came back, instead of going to the tent, they put us up on the hill. Spent the night there, and then that's the night that the star was invented. It was snowing, and there was no way that the airplanes couldn't get in. They couldn't see where we was going. In fact, we couldn't see hardly as far as we were to the wall from us. It was that thick. And so we were sitting that way, and all of a sudden, the sky cleared one place, and one star showed up there. And that's the star. And that's the star that we carry. Anyway, there was a colonel that was walking around through the camp. I was up on the mountain there, but I was up there, and I heard singing too. But I didn't know what it was about. I thought it was just trying to cheer everybody up. They're singing Marine Corps hymn. And this colonel just walked around, he heard the singing, he started looking at it, and he's seeing what is, there's all sitting there. And they asked him why, something that they pointed to the star up there.
Oh, and so they just burst out and sang
Yeah.
Marine Corps hymn.
And Colonel, when he got back to the General Smith, see, he was still there. He wouldn't leave. They told him to take a helicopter and get out of there and tell us to go every way we wanted to. But he wouldn't leave. He stayed with us. And the colonel went back to the colonel. The general said, "Do you hear him singing there?" He said, "Yeah." Told him, said, the Chinese don't have a chance now. The general says, they never did have.
That's why you all loved and respected him so, because he
Right.
stayed right there with you. That's
He
amazing.
kept us together.
Yeah.
And he didn't just take the helicopter out and say, y'all stay together and get out of there. He was with us
Yeah.
all the way. And now he might, I don't know that he rode in the convoy from Hagru to Coterie. He might have done the helicopter where he could see what was going on. But he was there at Coterie, and then of course, I imagine he flew on down with the helicopter down to the coast. Coterie is at the top of this pass, and the pass it was made for horse and mule or carts, and so just two trucks couldn't pass. They had to, if one's coming up and one's going down, they'd radio, and they had places along different places where they could pull over and side. And if they did pass, they'd have to get over against the wall there, and one come over here, and the wheels would almost be falling off. So I heard there's one or two that did go over the side of it. Anyway, the bridge there was blown out. We couldn't get it out because of the bridge. And there was our engineer there. He said if he could get, I think he said about 4 treadways, they call them. It's about that wide, metal deal like that. You've probably seen pictures of them there on TV. They'd have holes in them all along like that. It was made actually for sand, like in Arizona, someplace like that, for the planes to land in and they'd land on it instead of hitting the sand and rolling over or something. But he said that if he could get about 4 of them in there, that he thought he could fix that bridge. And so he ordered 10 of them. And they couldn't bring them in as long as it's snowing like that because they wouldn't know where to drop them at. They couldn't see it. They'd have to be way up high, and they couldn't see where to drop them. So that was one of the reasons that they was all sick. But they dropped the bridges and put them out there. And you can imagine a deal about that wide that you had. I've walked across it. And the trucks, of course, and Jeeps, they drove. Now, the trucks, of course, are wider than the Jeeps. They had one for the trucks like that on wheels here and wheel there. If a Jeep came up there, they'd have to take one of them and move it over until the Jeep would get there. And the Jeep would go through, and then if a truck came along, they'd have to move it back again. And whenever we walked over there saying, don't look down, but I had to look down. But man, if you fell there, there's no way you could survive, I think. Right straight down 1,000 feet or something. But
They didn't plan on you having that ingenuity, did they?
no. But then they dropped 10 of them. They said I think there's 4 of them that was damaged enough they couldn't use them. Of course, they didn't need but 4, so they still had 2 or 3 of them left over. But I've got pictures of that too. But, yeah. And I was going to try to, I've got one somewhere. Oh, I know where it's at. It's out in my car.
Oh.
That's where it's at. My red book, way out back. See, there's a woman at Grayson County Courthouse up there in the vet's office.
Mm-hmm.
She's wanting me to bring those in, show them to her, and tell her about it. And I got them in there. I went up there one day, but they was closed. It was in Dennison's time, so I still got them there. That's where it's at. That's the reason I couldn't find it.
I knew it'd come to you when we talked about it. So you all came out of the reservoir, up the mountain.
It was down the mountain. We went up the mountain, going up there, down the mountain, going down.
Okay, and you crossed the bridge on your way down.
Yeah.
And you guys were headed to the ocean, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
And now, there's one place up there when it was coming down, when you came around the bend, you could see the ocean out there and see the ships out there.
That gave you hope.
Yeah. And I'll tell you something else. Here's something that I've wished many times known something or could have done something about it. Maggie Higgins, do you happen to know her?
No.
She was a reporter, and she was at Chosin Reservoir when we were there. And they tried to get her to fly out, and she says no. She's coming out with. But, well, she didn't come out with us, actually, but she stayed there until we moved out, and then she came helicoptered down to the base, and she was down there when we came down. She was there taking pictures of us and so forth. And we had walked all the way, the 78 miles there, until we got out of the pass there before there was not worried about the enemy anymore. And so we got on the trucks. I got on one of the trucks there, and I sat on the front. The cab was, I sat here. The driver was right here. His head's just about even with my feet, probably. And we got on this trucks. It was just like that. I mean, all over the trucks, the fenders and there and everything. And she was over on the side whenever we was coming out, taking pictures. And I wished that some of those pictures she took, I wish I'd have seen. Now, I've showed some of them, but it didn't, or whenever I've looked anyway, it's never showed me on it. I wanted to see that one so bad. Because I seen her aiming the camera over it. In fact, we waved at her and she waved back and all that.
That was pretty unusual at that time, wasn't it, for a woman to be...
Very unusual. And there's something else that was unusual, too. I've got to tell you this. We had planes that came in, to pick up the wounded and fly them out to Japan, to the hospital and down south, things like that. There was a woman nurse on the plane. And I got a picture of that, too, but it's in the book. I wish I could have got it. If I'd known about it, I could have went down and got it, but I couldn't think of where it was at. But anyway, I didn't go to that, but one time, I think it's the guy that's frozen, his legs frozen solid from here down. I think I helped him get to the airport. Of course, we didn't walk. We went in a Jeep over there. And got up over the plane, and she was standing over there. Oh, she was a nice-looking woman, too, young. But she wasn't as young as she looked, because she was in World War II. And she had done the same thing then in World War II that she's doing then, flying wounded out and stuff. And anyway, when I got her on there, she said, she asked me a question. I don't recall now what it was. But I said something to her. She said, put him there on that. I think she asked how he was or what it was or something like that. And, of course, there's bunks about that far apart, not about 8 high. And I've wished many times that I had asked her her name or something like that. I got her name now, but I don't remember it. But it's in one of those books because she died here. And come to find out, she was a member, too, but I didn't know that. I would have loved to talk to her. But she was a member of our Chosin feud. And it had in one of our digests there when she died, about her dying. And I've got 2 or 3 stories on her.
So she was the nurse that helped evacuate the wounded.
Yeah, and they told her, the Chinese was shooting at the planes, was coming in and going out. And they told her to let some of the men do it. And she said, no. She said, that's my job, so I'm doing it. So she took the last plane out full of wounded.
Wow. And was she with the Army or with the Marine Corps?
No, I think she was Navy.
Navy. Okay.
I think she was Navy medic and stuff like that, doctor.
So they evacuated most of the wounded to hospitals in Japan, not so much like a hospital ship or...
Well, no. Now, they might have took them to... might have taken some down to South Korea, and then they put them on a vehicle and took them to out on the Repos. That's a medical ship that was there. And then, of course, but I read about where they said that they took them, not necessarily all of them, but some of them. Of course, they probably had hospitals there in Korea full because we had planes full of them. They come in almost as fast as they land and take off, another one be in there.
And most of them were from their injuries were from being frozen.
Frozen or shot.
Mm-hmm.
And and I've got some DVDs that I've watched too. Right there's one of them shows interviews of people that where they tell about where one guy he's telling about grenade landed in his foxhole and blew him out, and he says he can remember feeling flying through the air, but he don't remember hitting the ground. And whenever he came to, or anyway, he looks around, and there's somebody's leg from about here down, laying over at the side. Boy, somebody's lost their leg. And he looked over, and his buddy was over here that was in the foxhole with him. He got blown out too. And he was going to crawl over to see him. He was dead, though, but he was going to crawl over to see him. He said he moved this hand, that one. When he went to put this, he fell. That was his leg.
Oh, man. Well, when you all went back to your base camp, I guess it was getting close to Christmas time?
Well, see, we fought our way out down to Ham Hung there, went aboard the ship, and the ship took us back down to South Korea, and Mason, Pusan area. And that's where we spent Christmas at, was down in South Korea.
So you came out of all that ice and everything, got on a ship, and went back
Yes,
down to
to
separate
Pusan.
territory.
Yeah, Pusan, Mason. So that ship, though, didn't just have us, it had civilians on it. It was packed. Oh, I wish I could show you the film that showed the whole ship's out on the deck is back to back, stomach to stomach, and everything out with us. It's just packed in there. You don't know how they could get so many in there and stuff like all the way up. See them stacked up upstairs and everything. I mean,
Who were the civilians?
North Koreans.
Oh, really?
They was trying to get out too, and I tell you what, the civilians, they came down there and they put some of them down in Pusan area. They put some on the island out there, and the families, of course, they had babies. Well, some of the babies were born aboard ship, some out there on the island and stuff. Man, my nose itchy. But anyway, there's one of them out there. The woman was pregnant, had the baby on the island out there. He is the president of South Korea now.
Really?
And he's attended at least one of our meetings, and I wanted to go to that one so bad. It was back in 2 years ago in Norfolk, Virginia. Well, it was what was it? Sea coast over there, Norfolk.
In Virginia? Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he was there. We had a meeting there about 3 or 4 years ago now, and I didn't go. I wanted to so bad, but he was there, and he thanked us all for our service and stuff like that. But I thought that's pretty good, though. He was North Korea. He wasn't even born yet, but his mother and father was evacuated from North Korea, and he was born, and now he's president of South Korea.
That's an amazing story right there. Now, when you got back to your base camp, was it warmer? Did you get to eat a
Well, I tell you, whenever we moved down to South Korea there, I'm not sure whether we run around with any clothes on or not.
It was quite warmer, huh?
It was warm enough we didn't run coats and things like that around it. You know, there might have been some of them had been there all the time, and it was cool enough. It was December, so they might have been cool enough. But I don't think any of us did. Maybe a few of us did.
Because to you it was a heat wave, right?
Yeah.
And did you get to eat a hot meal? Do you remember your first meal when you got to...
Well, I don't recall the first meal, but I remember a meal there that I ate. See, when we got back there, they had a building that they had the cooking in, but it was small enough that they couldn't serve in there too, so they set up a line outside. We'd have to go outside with our mess gear and go through the line. They'd give you food. And I had a tent that I'd set up out there, And I got my food and went back into the tent. And so I was sitting there eating, and all of a sudden, like, I heard a big, loud explosion. And then something was raining down on my tent and stuff. I figured it was dirt and stuff from a bomb or whatever it was that went off. And then I heard guys outside cussing, man, they kept on cussing. I went out, and the guys that's been out there eating, this stuff was falling in their food and stuff like that. But it wasn't dirt. It was human waste.
Oh, the outhouse blew up?
Well, you see, they dug holes about 10 foot square and probably about 10 foot deep, and built a little deal over it with a couple of holes there, or four. We had portable things for 4 holes there. We set up on it. And when it started getting full, well, they'd pour some kerosene or something like that in there and burn it out. Mm-hmm. And this one time there that we was down there and they was going to burn it out, the guy poured some gasoline or something like that in there, and he didn't have a match. So he went back to his tent to get a match. Somebody came out there to use it, got him a cigarette, lit it up, dropped the match over there. Kaboom! And that's what was raining down out there.
Was that a casualty that was hard to explain?
I don't know whether they tried to explain it.
That's funny. Well, I can understand why they were having a fit out there, did you?
I did after that.
Yeah.
Because I knew about the burning them out and so forth because we'd done it before.
Right.
I was usually pour the gasoline in there, drop a match in it, and it flames up, and then it's over. But this time it had time for the fumes to get collected in there too.
Oh, mercy. A small bomb. So how long did you stay then before or did you come back to the States after that?
Well, after we got there, we was there for a while, and we had a couple of Korean kids in there that wanted to do things like shine our shoes and make our beds, things like it, for food. Mm-hmm. So we'd get them food from the child line there, and they'd come in there and eat it. And they wanted to stay there with us at night, but we told them no. But one night we woke up and they was there. But when we moved out, of course, we left them behind. They wanted to go with us too. Well, in fact, I tell you what, while we was there, they wanted to wear one of our uniforms, the utilities there. And somehow or another, somebody got one made up small enough that they could wear it. And so they did. But whenever we moved out, we made them stay there. After we moved way up this way and done after 2 or 3 days or something like that, here's 2 kids come in there with dirty uniforms on. They had taken a train and rode from down there up there and walked through all the hills and things like that to get to us. And they came, and RCO didn't have the nerve to make them stay there. They kept them with us for a while then after that. But then, of course, I left from there then, so I don't know what happened to them, whether they stayed with us there or whether they went back or not. But that was, it was like a reunion of when those 2 kids came up there.
Oh, yeah.
But and something else, when we got up there, they wanted a gun too. And something, RCO, give them a carbine. I don't know whether they give me any ammunition now.
So what were your weapons? What were the weapons that you carried?
Well, I tell you what, I was a rifleman, had a .30 caliber rifle, but I didn't like the idea of crawling into my sleeping bag, laying the rifle here on my stomach and zipping it up, because if the enemy come, there was no way I could shoot. But if I left it outside, I'd have to unzip it and reach over and get it. And so I got in good with the armory guy. He gave me a pistol. So I carried a pistol And somewhere along the line, I finally, yeah, well, that was later on, I got a carbine. But anyway, I'd go to bed at night. I'd lay the pistol right here and zip it up. If somebody came up there, all I'd just have to do is just raise it up a little bit and shoot. I could shoot them through my deal and so forth. So I had at least 2 weapons with me all the time there after that.
How much did all of that weigh? I mean, you had a backpack, you had the heavy coats.
Well, the
had
backpack,
clothes.
they said the backpack was around 90 pounds by itself. Now, see, that backpack was back there and the one attached to the bottom of it. And we had a sleeping bag rolled up in our tent. It went over the outside of our deal there. And you've probably seen them with these rolls back on the back with the roll on them. That was a sleeping bag in a tent.
Okay.
And
Everybody carried that.
everybody carried that. Infantrymen now, probably not everybody, but if you had to sleep in a foxhole or tent, well, that's the way you carried it.
So when you walked that 78 miles back down the mountain and everything, you were packing a 78-pound backpack?
Well, I was supposed to. But I tell you what, I cheated.
Oh. Okay.
When we got outside the line there, we're up the gate there, you know, the enemy is out here and we was back here. Whenever we started going out, we had to go through the front here, on around up there. That's whenever we had this field box back up there the Chinese had, and they had the roadblock there. They had machine guns. They could cover it there and kill anybody that got up there. So we called in napalm and stuff like that. And they couldn't, those planes come in sometimes real low there, and we'd look at them, and we made comments. You probably heard them talking about that guy must be married, have 10 kids up there, you know, because he'd fly way up high. One come down like this, oh, he must got a divorce. Dear John, things like that.
Because he was taking chances.
Yeah, he didn't care whether he lived or died. And so we was out there, and we had a machine gun set up out there waiting, and we had heard a plane way up there, look up there, and just barely seen this plane cruising along up there. It looked like about like that then, but and a few minutes later, somebody, look, what's that? Look up there, and something was falling, coming down. And I thought, oh, somebody fell out of that plane. But it wasn't that. It was a napalm bomb, and it was coming down behind us. But it was also going that way. But when we seen it, it was back up behind us up here. But it kept coming like that. It landed just outside that pillbox up there that we was trying to get. It exploded and rolled over that pillbox. And seen these Chinese coming out of there. Wasn't but about 2 or 3 of them came out, but they'd run at the very most far from here that wall, and then I was dead because it was on fire, you know.
Yeah.
And some of them didn't even make it that far. But that guy up there, he's done a lot better. Well, up there, just barely could see him, but man, he done a good job. Yeah.
With his target.
And then we fought our way on down to Coterie there, and I told you about going into tents and all that stuff. And then we had to fall back out and go back because they cut the line back about halfway between Hageru and Coterie. We had to go back and open that up. And then we stayed there until the last time we gone through, and then we went up. This time, though, they didn't tell me to go into a tent. This time they put me up on the mountain up there. And overlooking the camp there, though. But there was a wounded guy there. Whenever I went up there, he was already wounded laying out there, but I give him my
Poncho.
well, I think I give him the poncho, but also blankets. That's what it was, blankets. I think we call it something else, but anyway, put it over him. Gave him next morning whenever we was getting ready to. Well, when everybody started moving out and stuff like that, he wasn't there. So somewhere along the line, a corpsman must have came and got him, and I must have been dozing because I sat there in the foxhole with the rifle sleeping. If the noise come along and wake me up or something. But he was about as far as me at that door away from where I was at. And so they probably came and got him, and they'd try and be quiet too, so that they wouldn't disturb any of the Chinese out there. But then when everybody's through, just a few people down there ready to go out, well, they called us off, went down, and somebody said, "Hey, Haun," said, "You're alive." "Yeah, well, they found my pack." Oh, I was going to tell you, I get started talking this, so, but when came out of that place where I was talking about where the napalm came out and stuff, well, just after we started moving around, one of our Jeeps came along with a trailer, and I pulled my pack off, put it on the Jeep, and I didn't have anything like that. Just, well, what I had on was what it was, the poncho, I guess, what I give that to the guy up there.
Okay.
But anyway, I went up there, I didn't have anything. Well, anyway, he said, when it's come down off of that, they said, "Haun, you're alive." "Yeah, well, they got you reported as missing in action. They found your pack out there." And come to find out, they found my pack was laying out there. It must have either fell off, or it might have been whenever they broke the line, they might have got it. But anyway, the pack was opened up, so the Chinese had gotten it somehow or another, opened it up, and was getting clothes, anything that's warm, out of it. But I had money orders that I had bought. I couldn't mail them out because the mail wasn't going out. It's taking wounded out instead, so we had to take them with us. Money order, and had my name on it and all that sort of stuff, though. And so they found that, and they thought that the enemy had either got me or killed me or something like that. So they had listed me as being missing in action. And Mother got the word.
Really?
Yeah.
So that happened quickly.
Well, I don't know how quickly it was before she got the word, but of course they reported it there. And then, of course, that was about a week or so before we got down south, because whenever we got aboard ship, it took a week to sail around there and land over there on that side. And so they had plenty of time, even after we got down there, before they knew that I was alive. But I found a money order that I had made up. And I was sending my money to home to Mother and Dad. And
How much was it, Mr. Haun?
I don't know.
Not enough, was
No,
it?
I've slept since then.
Okay. What was your rank at that time, and how old were you at that time?
I think I was a corporal. Somewhere along the line, I made sergeant and then staff sergeant and so forth. But I'm not sure. I think that when I came back to the States, I was a staff sergeant. But
And how old were you?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I was over 20, though.
Over 20, but not 30.
No.
No.
When I retired, I must have been about 50 or 40 something. Anyway. See, I went in at 45, retired in 66. That's 21 years, wasn't it? So,
Yeah. So you're still a baby.
oh, yeah. I still am.
Yeah. Well.
Can't you tell by looking?
Yes, I did.
And the way I act. Yeah.
I think people would be surprised to know. Tell us how old you are.
Well, this last September, I was 91 years old.
My goodness, that's amazing.
And I still exercise. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm in as good shape as I am, because I've kept my body in shape even after I retired. I've done things, well, of course, until I came over to Renaissance, I had a house and 12 acres of land. It's all woods. I had wood-burning fireplace, wood-burning stove. And so that's the way we kept warm. I had to cut my own wood.
Right.
So cutting wood and splitting it and carrying it in, things like that probably helps some too.
That's a good way to stay in shape, I think. Yeah. Well, you left Korea then in what year? Do you remember?
Well, I left Korea in '51.
Okay.
I went to Parris Island, South Carolina from there. And I was there for until about 52, around 53. Must have been about 52. They came in, called me in one day and said, me and one other guy is qualified to go to 8th and I in Washington, D.C. That's Marine Corps headquarters.
Okay.
And since I was qualified, I was given well, he was too, but I was given the priority of going or staying. If I didn't want to go, then the other guy had to go. And I asked him if he would give me a couple of days to think about it. He said, we'll give you until tomorrow. So I went back to camp, and I sat there for a while and studied on it and thought about it. Maybe I talked to somebody about it too, I don't know. But anyway, I decided to go ahead and go. So I called him up that evening and told him. I went to Washington, D.C. And Marine Corps headquarters, Commandant was in the same building, the same compound that I was in. And this was when Eisenhower was president, or he was president while I was there anyway, because I stood guard over him. One time we went up to Camp David, and he went up there, and we stood guard over him. But then, let's see, I met my wife there. And when I got to new base, I never looked a bar up. I never did drink or anything like that. Well, I have drank, but not anything like that. I look up a riding stable instead of a bar, and I'd go horseback riding. And when I went to Washington, D.C., that's the first thing I did, look up a riding stable. It was outside of the city, of course, so I had to drive about 10 miles to get out there to it. But I bought a brand new car, 54 Pontiac convertible, red, fire engine red. And I didn't want to leave it out on the streets if it wasn't broke into. The weather would damage it. So I looked for a garage to put it in. And I found one across the street from the Commandant's house. The house over there, they had a garage in the back. And I went in to ask them about if I could rent it, and could. My wife's grandparents was running it, and that's the way I met her, was there. And she used to tell about going to bed at night hearing taps and wake up in the morning to revelation.
Did you let her drive that hot car?
No, she didn't know how to drive. She'd never been on a horse or anything. She met me. She loved horses, but her grandparents wouldn't let her get close to them. Her mother died when she was 9 years old with TB. And somewhere before that, their parents separated. Now, I don't know whether it was legal or whether just he was in the Navy. He was a submariner. And it might be that they might not have been divorced. It might just be that back then they was shipping him to places where she couldn't go.
Right.
And so, but...
So when did you go to Vietnam?
Well, in '64, I put my letter in for retirement, and they told me, no, you got to stay in a little longer. I was at Camp Pendleton, and they shipped me to 29 Palms. I joined the ground air missiles there. And I was there maybe a month or two, and they sent us to Vietnam. And, of course, we set up a battery on a mountain over here and a battery on a mountain here. Oops. And a battery down at on the base, at the air base. And our radar would pick a plane when it left Hanoi. If it turned north, they would go toward China, so we let it go. If it came toward us, well, we would notify the Air Force. The Air Force would go out and intercept it and shoot it down or make it go back or whatever. If it was enemy and they if they got through them, then we would shoot them down because we had track of them and we could lock in on them and shoot them down anywhere along the line.
And was this the North Vietnamese?
Yes.
Coming? Yeah.
Well, it's North Vietnamese planes. Now, I think that Russia and China had furnished them with weapons, tanks, and all that sort of stuff, so they was well fortified more so than South Korea was, because we didn't put any tanks in there or anything like that, because we didn't think the tanks would maneuver around through those rice paddies and things like that too good.
Right.
And I understand they didn't want, well, Chiang Kai-shek was sort of a belligerent man, and they didn't want him to decide to attack North Korea. So they kept the big weapons away and things like that. Didn't let him have many planes and stuff.
Who was the president when you were in Vietnam?
Vietnam, I don't know who was there, but all I know is that
Eisenhower was in when you were in Korea, I guess.
no, it was Truman. It was in when I was in Korea. That was in 50 and 51. I was there,
Okay.
but
And did you have the same job the whole time you were in Vietnam? There at the
in Vietnam, yeah, I was with the ground air missiles, and I was there. In fact, we didn't even get fired. Well, the only time we got fired on was when we was coming in. The airplane landed out when we'd come over I'll say the swamps and stuff like that. They'd shoot at us.
Oh, okay.
We could hear bullets hitting the plane, but it never did hurt it enough to make it go down.
Yeah.
But the rest of the time, we never did get shot at.
How long were you there?
2 years. Went there in 64 and came back December 65 actually is when I came back. But
Did they let you retire then, or did you take on another assignment?
well, they didn't let me retire right then, but I came back there, and then my letter was in, and they got us out there talking to us, and the ones that was retiring or wanted to stay in, things like that, they tried to get me to ship over. They said, ship over, so we guarantee you stay here at the base and another strap. They'd give me another strap if I did that. But while I was there, see, we went over as a unit in 63. And in July, all people started being transferred out, 5 or 10 here, and another new ones come in, we break them in and stuff like that. And in December, when I guess I was about the last ones of the old part of them that was there, by the time that I left, I seen these guys that was there with me before coming back in again. They'd been gone about 6 months, and they was back again. And so I told the Sergeant Major there, I said, what's to keep you from sending me back over again? Because I seen this happen, and I know it could. He said, I'd guarantee you wouldn't. So I'd make sure you stayed here. Well, a few weeks after I retired, I was walking around Oceanside in the middle of the week. I met the Sergeant Major there in civilian clothes. I said, hey, Sergeant Major, what you doing out here in civilian clothes? Oh, I'm retired. I said, how in the world could you retire and be sure that I would get all the things that you promised me? He said, well, so I had to give it a shot.
Oh. Well, you made the right decision.
Yeah.
Cameron, you've been watching this. Do you have any questions that come to mind that you'd like to ask Mr. Haun?
I mean, it seems like we covered a lot of ground there.
Well,
Is there anything you'd like to share with us that I kind of haven't led you to? Is there anything else you'd like to?
Well, there's one thing that I'm not going to talk about. I didn't like Truman, and that's all I'm going to say about that.
You didn't like what?
Truman,
German?
because I think he's partly the cause of Korea. But anyway,
Well,
no, that's
Truman, you think he kind of stirred that up?
well, not that he started. He just let things go. He didn't like the Marine Corps, and he was trying to get rid of the Marine Corps to start with. And he was getting there. Any time that a company or something like that would get short of people, he'd close them out and move them out. So. But no, they. Well, I got started on it. I might as well tell. See, when we was in China, 1948, I left there in 48. The communists was taking over. They was pushing the Chinese back. If the communists shot at us, we could not shoot back. We'd close up camp and move the camp back. They come up and they shoot at us again. We'd close up and move back again. And if we had World War II was over, everybody was afraid of the United States. We was it, you know. And we could have stopped the communists from going into China. That's the way I feel. If we'd have stayed there, we could have stopped them from going in there, and China would be nationalist today. And of course, that might have even been, if that had happened, might not have even had North Korea fight there. We had stuff like that. But anyway, they all give us up for lost. They said there's no way we can get out. Newspapers, that's something I've been looking for a newspaper. Back in 45, December 45, the newspaper's headlines, 7th Marines going to be annihilated, and all that stuff. And I'd like to, or not 7th Marines, 1st Marine Division. And I've wanted to get one of those headlines. I've got a DVD somewhere where the guy says that his mother and father saved those headlines for him, and he's still got them. But I would like to have them. My mother and father, I don't know, they probably didn't want to have anything to do with it and so forth. But in fact, I had my mother, she wouldn't sign for me to go in the Marines. See, I was a little underage.
Were you 17 when you went in? Or?
I was 17 then, but 16 was by the time I signed, asked her to sign the papers for me. And she wouldn't do it, and that's why I lie about my age and tell them that I'm 18. So she didn't want me lying about my age.
No, I bet she didn't. Interesting.
I did have one more question, and I may have just missed it, but so what was the total amount of time that it took you that you were in the Chosin Reservoir to get out? Like, what was the total number of days or weeks?
Well, I'll let you figure it out. Thanksgiving Day, we had our last hot meal. The Chinese hit us that night.
Okay.
And that was in November of 1950. We got back down to South Korea around the 12th of December.
Okay.
Of 50? 1950?
Yeah, 12th of December 1950. So it was from Thanksgiving Day, November, to Christmas, might as well say until Christmas, that we was trapped and fighting our way out.
Wow.
And
lost all those people.
yeah. And I think, see, I had a field jacket like I had over there. A field jacket, fur lined, and all that stuff. And it was, it was heavy. I had it when I was over there, and I had it here. And I took it down to the dining room to show them one day about, I like to show things off. In fact, I wore my uniform down there, the dress blues.
Oh, wow.
I can still get in my dress blues, by the way.
Awesome. That's
And
great.
I could have came down in them, I guess.
Beautiful. Yeah. Oh, that's
Of course,
the
I'd
uniform.
been sitting like this. But anyway, I took it down there, and it's a little hot, so I pulled it off and laid it on the back of the chair. And for some reason or other, I didn't pick it up. I went upstairs with my wife. Of course, that was probably the main reason I haven't paid so much attention to her that I wasn't thinking about that. Later on, I remembered it and went back down, and it was gone.
No.
And I asked the people in there about it. Nobody's seen who picked it up or anything like that. And we had a lost and found department, and it wasn't there either. And I told everybody about it around here. So one of the employees, I imagine, worked in the kitchen or the dining room there. The high school kids, anyway, they probably got it as a souvenir. But anyway, if I talked to the guy that did it, he said he didn't do it because he said he didn't know what happened or he didn't see it and stuff like that. But I like to show things like that off.
Yeah.
And, just like this, I wore this down for that purpose, to show that and that.
Yes, yes, it's in the 7th tradition.
And this is what the Chosen Few has for it. And I told you about the star.
That star, that's amazing, isn't it?
But
Especially the season that it was. You know, it was close to Christmas, and we think about the star at Christmas and the hope that it brings, and that's interesting.
Well, see, that time there, it was the one star that showed up. That one star, and just breaking the clouds. And it cheered everybody up because they knew that it was going to clear out enough that we could get our bridge in, put it up and stuff.
Right. What a great
And, you know, if you got killed laying out there, you'd freeze in that position. Mm-hmm. And we had truckloads of dead. And if it was wounded, it could not walk. But if they could walk at all, they'd hang on the side of the truck and walk along that way. Even if they couldn't stand up good, if they could move their legs, hung onto the side of the truck or Jeep or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I was walking by one, seen this guy sitting on the side over there, like that. I waved back at him, and guy with me says, "Wasn't that guy dead?" I said, "I don't know." I stopped and went back and looked. He was dead. He was frozen in that position. And there is a picture of that, not of me, but of that guy waving his hand like that. But of course, he wasn't waving his hand. He was probably sitting. Never know. He might have been up, "Here I am," or something like that.
Yeah. Did you feel? I know that our country always makes an effort that everybody gets to come home. Did you feel that most of our guys who didn't make it got to come home?
Well, I tell you what, I think about the dead all the time, ones that didn't make it.
Right.
And I'm thankful that I did, and I thank my commanding general for what he did to keep us there. If he had told us to scatter like everybody, I won't say MacArthur, but MacArthur's aides, ones that called around and told people to do things like that, they told him to get a helicopter out of there and tell us to get out any way we could. And he said, "No, we're coming out as a unit and we're not coming out." And that is the only reason that I can figure out that, because if I had to have walked 178 miles through enemy territory, and all those Chinese, they had us surrounded. There's no way we could get by them without fighting our way through them. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's what we did. We fought our way through them, but we stayed together to do it. Mm-hmm. But the Fox Company, see that the last stand of Fox Company, did I ask you about that? What that?
Yes, but let's talk about that again.
Okay.
The last stand of Fox Company.
The last stand of Fox Company, that to me, that means nobody was left. They was all killed. That is incorrect because there's about 25 of them came out to Agri where we was at. And I know that because I joined Fox Company then. We spearheaded on down to Coterie. And I know Fox Company did not get whacked out. Unless maybe I'm dreaming now.
No, I'm quite sure that your memory is great. So if anyone wants to read more about the Chosin Few, I see you have some books here about
Well,
it. And
I've got a
DVDs.
bunch of them. This one right here, The Last Stand of Fox Company. And this one here, The Chosen.
Okay.
It's a good one. I've read through it some, and I think I've read through it just.
That's good. And
That's
the
a DVD there.
okay.
This is a DVD, The Chosen Few Brotherhood. There's a lot of DVDs. I've got several of them out that I've got on that. And there's some there that, let's see. I don't think, no. I was thinking I might have another folder like this, but anyway, there's several DVDs on it. I wish I could think of the names of it now. So,
wow. Well, maybe we can research them online and find some more info about it.
Speaking of online, I got to tell you.
Okay. Okay.
See, I pass out Tootsie Rolls here all the time. Well, whenever we first came here, I was buying those black and white Tootsie Rolls like I showed you.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, for different things, Veterans Day, 4th of July, Mother's Day, and Father's Day, I'd hand them out to people and say, like, if you was resident here and you had a guest come in, I'd come over and give you Tootsie Rolls and stuff. Well, after I went through that Medal of Honor parade, I told you about that, didn't I? Okay. I just want to be sure I did.
Yeah.
I got those red and white blue striped Tootsie Rolls. And the Tootsie Roll people started giving those to me. And so I still pass them out here. And people, if I happen to look like right now, I'm just got out of the Tootsie, the red, white, and blues. So I'm going to be passing the others out. And they'll be wanting to know what happened to the red, white, and blue.
Yes, they will, because they're bigger.
Yeah. But that, I'm very thankful, and I appreciate what the Tootsie Roll people have done for me. They've helped me out, and I hope in return. Oh, I've had 3 or 4 people here, most of them women, that's told me that I've made them addicted to the Tootsie Rolls. And I had to go to Walmart and I bought 4 packages of them.